So imagine a war that kicks off with missiles in West Asia, but somehow ends up changing what's for dinner, the clothes you wear to work, and even the news you see online. In this explainer, we're going to trace exactly how a modern regional war can send shockwaves that you can feel, literally, all over the world. It just seems so disconnected, right? A fight happening thousands of miles away, what does that have to do with your grocery bill? Well, as we're about to see, our world is way more tangled together than you might think. And that's really the big question we're digging into today. The answer? It's pretty surprising and, honestly, incredibly important. All right, so what kind of conflicts are we even talking about here? Well, this isn't your grandfather's war with tanks and trenches. No, this is a high-tech battle fought almost entirely in the air, a clash of sophisticated missiles and drones, mainly between Iran and a coalition led by the US and Israel. The first few days are just intense. You've got missiles slamming into financial hubs like Dubai and hitting cities in northern Israel. A military base over in Iraq gets hit, killing a French soldier. And the response from the US is this massive air campaign. But the single biggest move, the one that really affects the rest of the world, the complete shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz. That's a vital artery for global trade, and it's just been clamped shut. And that shutdown, well, it immediately sets off the first and maybe most obvious ripple effect, a huge shock to the global economy. And it all starts with the one thing pretty much everyone depends on: oil. Just let this number sink in for a second. 20 million. With the Strait of Hormuz closed, 20 million barrels of oil are just gone from the global market every single day. I mean, that's a gigantic shortfall, and it sends the world's energy markets into a complete and total panic. So with the main supply of oil choked off and prices going through the roof, you'd think it's just bad news for everyone, right? But here's the thing about geopolitics. One country's crisis is often another one's golden opportunity. So who actually stands to gain the most from all this chaos? Yep, the answer is Russia. Suddenly, with the whole world desperate for oil that's not from the Gulf, Russia finds itself in an incredibly powerful spot. Moscow starts raking in an extra $150 million a day. It's a direct windfall from the crisis, and it just shows you how fast the tables can turn. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Just look at the whiplash here. Last year, Washington was hitting India with tariffs for buying Russian oil. Today, with a massive energy crisis on their hands, the US ambassador is suddenly calling India a great partner for doing the exact same thing. It's a total 180, and it shows you how quickly principles can get flexible when things get tough. Okay, so while the whole world is fixated on the price of gas, a second, much quieter crisis is brewing. This one doesn't fuel our cars, it fuels us. This conflict is starting to pose a really serious threat to the global food supply. You know, we always hear about the Strait of Hormuz as this massive oil choke point, but it turns out it's just as critical for food. Why? Because the nations in the Gulf supply almost half of the world's traded urea, and urea is the main ingredient in the nitrogen fertilizer that makes modern farming even possible. Without it, crop yields would just plummet. And you can see the chain reaction here, right? The strait closes, which stops the fertilizer shipments. Then, farmers in huge agricultural countries like Brazil and India, who totally depend on these imports, suddenly can't get what they need. They're forced to use less fertilizer, and that leads directly to smaller harvests. And you guessed it, higher food prices for every single one of us. But this war isn't just being fought with missiles and economic blockades. Nope, it's also being waged on these unseen battlefields, in government budgets and all over our social media feeds. Okay, just look at the math on this. It's wild. The US is firing a $4 million Patriot missile to shoot down a drone that costs, maybe $30,000? That's a cost difference of more than 100 to 1. It exposes a huge vulnerability. You can technically win every single battle, but still end up losing the war because you just go broke. It's just simply not sustainable. And it's not just about the staggering financial cost. There's a whole other front, the information war. And here, the goal isn't just to blow up physical targets, it's to blow up the truth itself, using a flood of AI-generated deepfakes and pure propaganda. Listen to this. This quote actually comes from the journalist in the source material. Someone made a deepfake of him saying all this false, inflammatory stuff. It really brings the threat home, because when you can't even trust a video of a familiar face, well, the whole idea of a shared reality starts to fall apart.
And that brings us to the final ripple. We've seen the economic chaos, we've seen the information war. Now let's look at how the conflict starts to physically show up thousands of miles away in communities that thought they were completely insulated from it all. So check this out. Within 24 hours of each other, 2 violent attacks happen in the US. A man drives a truck into a synagogue in Michigan. A gunman opens fire in a university classroom in Virginia. And while the specific motives are being investigated, U.S. officials are warning, loud and clear, that intense conflicts overseas can absolutely inspire and trigger extremist violence right here at home. The war isn't over there anymore.
And the impact can be way more subtle, too. Just take a look at Thailand, a country that's nowhere near the fighting. Because of the energy crisis that this war created, their government has to bring in nationwide conservation rules. The prime minister is on TV asking office workers to literally take off their jackets and ties. Air conditioners are being set to 26 degrees Celsius. The ripples of the war are actually changing the dress code. So from the price of food at the supermarket, to the clothes you wear to work, to very real threats in your own community, what all this shows is that the line between foreign problems and domestic problems is just blurring. It leaves us with a really critical question to think about. In a world that is this interconnected, is it even possible anymore for a major war to truly stay over there?